The 2025 VB generation Subaru WRX TS. We are not going to be seeing an STI for this generation, so the TS, or tuned by STI, is the sportiest variant of this car we're going to be seeing. Now let's talk about price first. This thing is not cheap. It starts at over $46,000, nearly $47,000, which means it's priced right along fully loaded GR Corolla, Civic Type Rs, Golf Rs. This car is not cheap. And for $25,000, they simplified the rest of the WRX lineup. So you no longer have a true base. Instead, you have the premium model, which starts at just over $35,000. So there's essentially a $10,000 delta from the base car to this. So what are you getting? Well, we're going to be talking about the mechanical changes in the shop, but from an exterior and interior perspective, slightly different front and rear fascias, some TS badging. You cannot get a sunroof, which makes sense in a more track-oriented car. Powered, heated Recaro seats as standards, a Harman Kardon audio system, and the rest of the interior is largely carryover, which is both a pro and a con. It's a very usable vehicle. Most people buy WRXs have families. The back seats fold down. Back seats themselves are, well, not the most comfortable things in the world, fit a full-size adult. The front seats are very comfortable, though the seating position's a bit high, and most of the inputs are great. While I don't think the manual gearbox is the best feeling gearbox by any means, it kind of feels like you're moving a PVC pipe through gravel, it's still a manual sedan. You still have the typical Subaru Starlink infotainment, the giant tablet screen, which is going away. I can guarantee they're going to be moving towards that Outback system, which was just unveiled. You have an all-digital gauge cluster, which is actually very good, and it has some unique STI graphics associated with it. So with that, let's head in the shop and put this thing up in the lift. In the shop with the WRX TS. TS stands for Tuned by STI. So what does TS do? Well, other than some of the interior and exterior changes, it's largely a wheel and tire, brake, and suspension package. They've not touched the engine at all. So starting with suspension, gone are the old passive dampers off the TR, and they've adapted similar dampers to the old GT, which was their prior top trim automatic only GT-ish model that was designed to compete with the Golf R, which was predominantly sold as an automatic. The sway bars are the same as the TR, however, the spring rates are much different. In the rear, you get the spring rates off of the old GT, which are softer than the TRs, and you now get even softer springs in the GT and the TR in the front. They're leaning on the adaptive dampers to give you more roll and pitch composure. It, I believe, has 30% less roll and 55% less pitch, meaning the body control of this car is superior overall. And it also gives you better ride refinement and ride quality. They're also using the Bridgestone Potenza S007 tires, which are an older summer tire design. Subaru will tell you that this has more mechanical grip than the outgoing STI, but again, these are more modern tires than were found on the old STI. If you're looking for a true track tire, I highly suggest looking at the Potenza Race and the RE71 RSs, tires we featured on the WRX in the past. This car also gets a unique brake package. They are 6-piston front, 2-piston rear. They are monoblocks from Brembo, and they have a fairly track-capable pad. This car does not have great alignment capability out of the factory, so what you're going to need to do is lean on the aftermarket. The other thing to talk about as well is the steering. They have uniquely calibrated the steering based upon the modes. As you increase the sportiness of the suspension, you can change the steering feel and apparently make it more direct. They have not adjusted the tuning for the all-wheel drive system. It is still a viscous coupling. Essentially, it's open diff front and rear. It defaults to 50-50, and it uses torque vectoring by brake to get this car in and out of corners, something the STI did not have to lean on, as it had mechanical diffs and essentially an entirely different all-wheel drive system. So that said, let's talk to Graham, and we're going to walk you through what makes the VB's engine so special. Well, for those who have not seen our several videos we've shot with Graham, this is Graham from Boosted Performance. He's the in-house tuner for URW Automotive. We're working on. Graham, can you walk me through sort of the VB, specifically the FA24, how much power it makes factory, how it compares to some of the older WRXs or the EJs out of the STIs, and sort of the limitations of the engine?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's a lot, but let's see what I can cover here. So first of all, it's hands down one of the best factory engines that Subaru has ever produced. Very, very surprising, very impressive. This is coming after the FA20 engine that was in the outgoing 2015 to 21 WRX. That was a pretty good engine, but a little bit disappointing in terms of power and power potential. And also you could find the weak points with it pretty easily in terms of braking rods and other things. And it's a pretty strong engine. It doesn't have the ringland issues like the EJ25 does of the outgoing STI, but it still was kind of lackluster. The FA24 really delivers an incredible engine with a lot of power and a very strong basis for a platform. We've got some guys pushing 500 horsepower on stock engines, running them around the road course, and they don't break, which is pretty astonishing for a Subaru engine.
When you're saying stock engines, are you saying stock turbos? Obviously,
Upgraded turbo in that case. Yeah, so upgraded turbo, running ethanol blends, full bolt-on package, everything to get there. At that point, they're swapping over to Subaru STI transmissions, because one of the sad things with the FA24 WRX is it still comes with the split case 6-speed, meaning it's kind of a 5+1. It's not very strong like the STI 6-speed. So a lot of these guys, they'll break those transmissions and they'll swap to a STI transmission. Nice thing is that Subarus are like Legos, so you can just drop that right in there with a few customizations and you're good to go.
With the base car, so if you just looked at this as like, hey, I'm coming to you, Graham, and I want to tune my completely stock car.
On a dyno jet, or a dyno that reads like a dyno jet, we dyno them about 265 at the wheel stock. Torque is about the 265, 270 range as well. They run a really soft boost curve, like just 11 or 12 PSI of really flat boost. So very conservative. When we tune them, even if we tune them completely stock, we increase the boost pressure quite a bit. The turbocharger actually has quite a bit of efficiency in it that Subaru didn't want to dial in. I think they didn't want this car to outclass the EJ STI, EJ25 STI, and easily it can match or exceed its power. So they purposely kind of detuned it, either for just incredible longevity or to keep the power where they wanted it. But we can turn the boost up. We can easily take the torque up to 350, 360, even 370 or 380 torque if we really lean on it down low. Horsepower wise, we can get them up to about 290 to 300 completely stock with no modifications, just good fuel. If we put an intake on it, we pick up an extra 30 horsepower. The stock intake is kind of the first big choke point. So I have hundreds of these cars where guys have just bought an intake, an access port, and a tune, and they go from 265 to about 330 at the wheels. And they go from 265, 270 torque up to about 370 torque. So it's an astonishing difference, a really good bang for the buck with an intake, an access port, and a tune.
So compared to the outgoing EJ engine and the STI, and definitely the old FA20, you would probably argue this is a superior engine, basically every way that counts.
It really is, honestly. Yeah, it's got nearly the same displacement, but it's direct injection. It's low mount turbo. It has pretty decently flowing heads and pretty decent cams for a factory engine. Those things still become limitations, but it's very good for what it is.
Do these motors start coming apart?
Well, we don't really know. If they'll come apart if you tune them wrong. They'll come apart if you don't respect the direct injection limits. They'll torch the heads. They'll have head gasket issues. They'll lift the heads. But I honestly, over hundreds of cars tuned, even some of these guys that are doing really obnoxious things with them, they haven't come apart. We don't really know. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say pretty sustained hard use at mid 500s. I think, again, if the tuning is perfect and nothing goes wrong, I think you would start to probably lift the heads a little bit, just find the limits of the factory head bolts. They can only clamp the heads down so much. So you'd probably start to run into head gasket issues, above 500 with hard use. I think that's the first limitation.
This isn't like the old EJs or really EJ motors that just randomly blow up for no reason.
Not really. No, I haven't seen a single ringland failure on one of these. I haven't seen broken connecting rods. I've seen, melted pistons from, again, tunes that were done wrong and things run too lean, but that's going to happen to any engine, even a forged engine. I've seen some head gasket issues from people that were, going too aggressive on the tuning. But no, really, this has been a very reliable engine.
Mark, I was real worried when we were going to get in this thing, the TS, that it would be missing the special sauce that completes every car.
What's that?
Bridgestones.
Yeah, you got the James Bond Bridgestones, this S007s. Oh my God!
the
I've never
crib.
felt G-force like that, Jack.
Oh, yeah.
Oh! So, Jack, TS WRX. This ain't no STI, but
No, but it's tuned by STI,
Okay.
Mark. Tuned. I really feel that as we understeer through this corner.
Understeer right off the track. So let's talk about it. What do you feel so far?
A lot of compliance. Let's talk about sort of the reality of this car. What most people are going to be doing with their WRX most of the time is not being on the track, despite
Yeah.
being in the STI model.
Of course.
But as a street car, this thing is really good. Rides very well. I mean, you drove what?
This is probably the best WRX in terms of all the things going on with
Yes.
it. Ride compliance, it doesn't feel like a tin can. It still is engaging to drive. It just feels like everything has been sorted out here in a good way. Clearly, it lacks the hard edge of like an S209
Yeah.
or the older STIs, but I think it does all the other things that you actually want this car to do, and is be fun to drive, not put you to sleep, handle well, and then the adaptive dampers make such a difference on this car.
I think not on track, but in the real world, if I'm just putting this thing around and driving this is sort of my do everything fun car, I think this is a better street car than a GR Corolla. It rides better. I think, honestly, I prefer the seats in this car to the regular Corolla. I think it's a more usable car, other than the fact that it's not a hatchback. But out on track, despite this being, STI tuned,
Well, yeah,
there's no edge. There's zero edge to this car.
What's been stripped out here is this is not for track or autocross. You're going to have to modify the hell out of it, like all of these things, to get the car to rotate. I mean, the first thing most Subarus do is exactly what you're hearing, is the front gives
the
up.
disappointing sound of understeer.
Yeah, and clearly, I'm okay with it for this type of car, for what it is. If this was bad, something more hardcore, if this was a full-blown, performance car from them, I'd be like, no. But I like the balance between the street and track, and I love how it is set up for the street. It is really, really great.
Yeah, so basically the way you get this thing to go through corners, the subtle lifts, you get the rear to come around. Basically, you're driving this more like a front-wheel drive car.
Yeah.
The fact that this doesn't have true mechanical limited slip differentials like you get in an STI also means, like we talked about in an original comparison test, sort of the dynamic limits of this car. You feel the fact that it's open diff. It's not an LSD setup, it's just a viscous torque vectoring by brake. Though, something you were concerned about initially, even though I will admit I'm not driving this thing crazy hard, the brakes in this car are pretty good. I'm sure you could throw some pads at this thing, and all you would ever need to do is pads and fluid. These six-spot Brembos in the front, 2 in the rear do a good job.
Yeah, I feel one thing that you could tell right away is the car's really balanced.
Yes.
Yes, it's understeer prone, but you feel that underneath this is a balanced car, that it really would not take much to get it to where you need it to do if you were doing something like this. I don't think it would be far away from just a really good, even bar change probably.
Yeah, and some real camber in the front.
Yes, some more camber in the front would help. But between
Engine
everything,
tuning's good.
yes,
We talked about
engine tuning's really good
for a Subaru.
Yeah.
Very consistent, good power. It isn't weirdly pull. I mean, I think too, something we never talk about is approachability of cars, and I think you could never ever have gotten out on track before and drive this thing fairly quickly with a high level of confidence. It's super, super safe feeling. I mean, I get it. While this may not be my flavor of dynamics in cars, I fully understand why people like this thing.
Oh, 100%.
All right, Mark, with that, let's head in the final thoughts, sir.
Sounds good.
Final thoughts on the 2025 Subaru WRX TS. Well, I am sad that there's not going to be a current generation STI, but as a sporty model offering, I think the TS does basically everything well. Good engine tuning, reasonable interior, the seats are very good. You have lots of usable space, and the adaptive dampers go a long way in making this a more usable car both on the track and on the street. It rides really well, has pretty good body control. It's very easy to drive at the limit. While it's not the edgiest car, I think on a bad weather day or a wet track, it would be very, very fun. I also appreciate that Subaru once again has fixed their engine tuning. I think the VB's engine, this 2.4, is much better than the older WRX engine. They don't blow up anywhere as much, and I think the overall aftermarket potential of these engines is better. And these 6-pot Brembos are much more capable than the standard brakes on a base WRX. Do I think it's worth $46,000 realistically before tax and other things? Honestly, I mean, there are lots of offerings in this space, and you're gonna have to love Subarus to buy this thing, but if you do, I don't think you're gonna be disappointed. Thanks to our Subaru reps, and lastly, Autobahn Country Club, our home away from home. They provide us a facility where we can drive these cars at their limit and experience what they're like to drive in high performance scenarios in a much safer environment than the street. So if you want to attend a track day, become a member, attend one of their driving academies, or of course buy real estate on site, please hit them up. So thanks for watching. Hope to see you again soon.